So I was going to the mall, the ABC Mall, near Verdun, which is near to the south of the city, and I was listening to the latest episode of this lovely podcast about the OYO hotel scam that doesn't make sense. And I was walking past an army checkpoint. There are a lot of them in the city. They're not uncommon, but I didn't hear them. And I was walking into a restricted area. I was just kind of laughing along, talking about the upholstery and oh wow, what a system. And then I heard one of them whistle at me, not in the sexual way, but in a way to signal me. And he had his hands on his Kalashnikov, his AK-47, and he directed me to get the hell out of the area.
Because you were doing the Virgin walk with like the headphones in.
I was. Oh, very.
You should have been doing the Chad walk, listening to the Romaniacs.
That's true. God, how many people has our podcast killed or almost killed?
Oh, well, there is one fan of ours did get run over by a car while jogging and listening to us.
Was he wearing a shirt that said "ouch"? That is the question.
He's fine, but we did give him a free shirt. Note: do not get yourself a free shirt by getting yourself run over by a car.
But
that is not a way we
give him a
endorse.
shirt, or did we say we were going to and then be too
No,
lazy
we did.
to do it? Okay, we did do it. All right, just want to confirm.
Okay, sure.
So I think that puts the people put in direct mortal danger by our podcast to two that we know about.
Also means that we have been militarily defeated by the Lebanese army.
Hello and welcome back to Trash Future, the podcast that has nearly claimed a couple of lives by accident. I am Riley, and I'm here in studio with Hussein, who's on the boards.
On the boards, probably fucking this up. Like, I'm looking at these bars right now, and I'm just feeling so anxious that Nate's just gonna disown me, and I'm gonna end up having to go to Trigger Pod to get a job.
So any complaints with the audio at Alex Keeley? At Alex
blast
Keeley.
From the past there.
Yes. We also have Nate, who got distracted by doing some DIY and is calling in.
I'm calling in from home in the house that podcasting built because I was building a dresser with Milo Edwards and I forgot what time it was and realized it was so late I couldn't get in time and I didn't want to just be a no-show on my own program. So here I am podcasting from my house. From my office.
See, this is the problem with Big Wife, because once you get in the pocket of Big Wife, you can no longer just sleep on a mattress on the floor, and you can no longer just keep bowls in a box. You have to build shelves.
You have to get out of the wife deal is the thing.
Yeah. the poly bonds of the JCPOA. We also have Alice calling in from neutral Glasgow.
Yes, we do. I think it's very optimistic, by the way, that we think we've only killed people on accident.
And we also have from sunny Beirut, Séamus Malekafzali. Séamus, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I'm enjoying the lovely neighborhood and all that Lebanon has to offer.
So if you don't know, Séamus is an analyst, a journalist covering Iran. He's actually is fluent in Farsi, and he's one of the most sort of knowledgeable people that you can talk to about this situation going on. I imagine that's why you're in Beirut now. You're not just there on holiday like Pete Buttigieg went to Somaliland.
No. I'm currently going to the American University of Beirut to study media and communication, and additionally also do journalism here that I can't do in Eugene, Oregon.
You're on a long hiking trip like Shane Bauer.
Jesus Christ, for God's sake.
Yes, the three people on Skype really get that one.
Look, you have to leave it in because people will like it, but...
I know Shane Bauer. This is why I'm a little bit okay.
So... we have another Iran episode today where we're going to talk about what the U.S.-Iran relationship means, what it means for the U.S. to be an imperial power in the 21st century, how that's different from how it used to be and how it's the same. But first of all, we have to revisit some old friends. We must revisit some old friends, because sometimes there is a letter that is sent. Sometimes these are significant letters of history. And one has been sent most recently. Dear Zume team members.
That was a weird way for the Iraqi parliament to open that withdrawal letter.
I always get confused with like Zoom and Zune.
Oh yes, Zune user, send us a message if you're out there. If there's the one person who's still listening to our podcast on a Zune, please do tell us. No, so there has been a letter sent by the CEO of Zume, a SoftBank-backed quote-unquote Amazon of food, by the CEO, basically informing them of the following. Since Zume was founded nearly 5 years ago, we have been blessed with an opportunity to invent brave and innovative solutions intended to improve our global food system. By the way, just for everyone counting at home, and as a reminder, their innovation was a truck that makes pizza while it drives to you.
Oh, that is brave.
Yeah, it was brave in the face of food critics who all said it sucked. They say,
who's clamoring for this?
It gets so much better so fast. I can't even begin to describe it.
So without recapitulating too much old ground, just so we know what we need to know for this, Zume was a startup that was a couple of pizza delivery vans in San Francisco that made the pizza robotically on its way to you. But actually what it did is just it finished and reheated it and then sliced it robotically on its way to you. It was still mostly made by people in a warehouse. It was horrible. It almost failed, was rescued by SoftBank with a $4 billion valuation. Then they did 30 different projects at once, one of which was spending 2 weeks Googling pizza boxes to try to invent a new one. And what they invented was a round one. But the revolution was that it was made from plant fibers. Unlike cardboard, which isn't made of plant fibers, it's like a moon material that doesn't grow on Earth naturally, of course.
It's made of tree fibers, which trees are different from plants.
Yeah, they're animal, vegetable, mineral, tree. That's the Zume food pyramid. Anyway, the letter goes on. Because when the CEO sends you a letter that says, since Zume was nearly founded 5 years ago, you know it's good. Ours is a broad agenda, including new methods to produce food, deliver it, and package it in increasingly sustainable ways. Today, our mission is the same and requires the same bold thinking, but with increased focus. I'm going to pause here. What do we think the theme of this letter is?
You're all losing
What are they
your jobs.
announcing?
Yeah, everybody fired. Clean out your shit. Security
Séamus?
will be escorting you.
Séamus, what do you think the theme of this letter is?
I'm gonna have to agree with Alice here. This is the perfect grandiose intro to being told that everyone is going to starve to death.
We have been blessed with this opportunity to everybody's so fired.
We've been blessed with this opportunity to right-size our organization.
Yeah.
This was the company, because I think I was away when you recorded this. This was the company that made the kind of round box, right?
Correct, yeah.
And there was no point building this box. So my thinking is that someone has been like, well, why don't we put it in a box that's shaped like an octagon?
Oh, because it tessellates. You can stack more of it.
It's the perfect midway point between a circle and a square.
And there's a co-branding opportunity with the UFC.
Just step inside the pizza octagon.
No, it will still taste like dog shit because they're committed to making it with as many robots as possible. So the next paragraph of the letter goes, as we move forward with this new strategy, this is points for Alice and Séamus. Yeah. Many of the current roles at Zume will no longer exist.
Thanos snapped them? You're not doing anything to them. They just no longer exist.
It's like the Twilight Zone episode with the little boy.
Yeah, they've what happens is that they've been caught in a time travel paradox, and now many of the roles at Zoom have been terminated before they actually begun.
You're just looking at the big photo wall of all the employees and seeing in horror yourself fading out of it.
Yeah, just everyone in almost every division, like sales, marketing, robotic pizza operations, just photos all fading. But they just gonna go on. And we regret we must say goodbye to a number of our valued friends and fellow, get ready for this one, Zoomers.
Oh, no. Next thing you know, they're all going to become trad. They're all going to fucking grow their beards and wear sundresses and be very decent.
Yeah, like what is Zoom pizza but trad wife food gore at an industrial scale, but that never escaped San Francisco?
Yes.
That's horrifying.
It's trad wife food gore, but it's the Jetsons. It's all the politics of the Jetsons with all the automation of the Jetsons and all of the corporate like commercial feasibility of the companies in the Jetsons. The letter goes on. These decisions were incredibly difficult, as we could not have reached our current success without the talents of these same people.
What success?
Well, what's
you're
success?
firing everybody from your box company.
Also, it's like, okay, so you couldn't have reached your current success without the talents of these same people. Fuck off, though. Bye. Bye forever.
Yeah. I know in my heart that the talents that they're talking about and the employees that they're talking about is one person who knows how to make a 3D model of a box and 50 social media people. And I feel bad for them. But in terms of the talent that's being deployed is mostly making people on podcasts aware of you.
I mean, success. Yeah,
absolutely.
Like if your measure of success is being mentioned on Trash Future 3 separate times, congratulations, you did it.
3-time champion.
So what they've actually done is they have closed down every single element of their business except the one that ever made an actual sale, which is their box division.
So that's it then. After 20 years of service, goodbye and good luck. Well, I don't recall saying good luck.
No, of course, the correct Simpsons reference here is, I don't know what kind of world-changing startup you're thinking of. We just make boxes here. Yeah, they literally just make boxes here now.
So basically they've decided that because they invented making cardboard out of plants, a thing that's never been done before, they now have the future in their own hands, which is to make round pizza boxes, and they don't need to make pizza, but they're still a tech company somehow.
Yeah.
Yes, they are still very much a tech company.
Now they're not handcuffed to their failing pizza division. They can just make boxes in all kinds of new varieties and dimensions. The world's their oyster.
They could make a box that's like a Dyson sphere. They can make a box that's a hypercube.
Yeah, I love to like open my special containment vessel to like get at my fucking my parcel of sex dildos or whatever.
So like also here's the other thing, and this is Séamus, like I can't help but thinking someone listening to this right now is so mad that these morons were given just billions and billions of dollars in Saudi oil, or given a billion of dollars valuation in Saudi oil wealth, that they're just like on purpose going to walk through a checkpoint. They're just gonna stop holding on to any railing that they're holding on to. Like, don't do that. Stay safe. Do not let the content of this show blackpill you.
Yeah, just wearing my stilettos out on an icy morning. Yeah, wonderful.
Okay, I'm going to say one more thing about this, and then we're going to move on to some Iran stuff. This is from a previous interview in June. This is about the packaging. This is why it's such a unique product. Alex Garden says, "We take the sugar cane and turn it into something wonderfully compostable. Essentially..."
Okay. I know you can't compost pizza boxes though.
Well,
when
these
the grease gets on it, you can't
because they're
you can't recycle it. What?
Yeah.
No, this will repel the grease because it's like made of leaves.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't worry, they're going to invent next the greaseless pizza.
Okay. So
closed
a roundabout way.
pizzeria.
Okay.
What if they had an idea where if you could fold the pizza in half, that way the grease stays inside?
Yeah,
Yeah, your new startup, it's calzone, but it just has all of the vowels removed, so it's just like...
I'm gonna do a startup called Cal No-Go Zone.
Damn it.
Essentially, he continues, as we scale more, it helps save the world.
Oh.
Yeah, fuck it, why not? Why not? Like,
You know,
Sure.
it is written in multiple pieces of scripture. Whoever makes a better pizza box saves the life of the world entire.
Oh, is that a hadith?
I mean, I didn't know that the Talmud was about pizza, but I wouldn't be surprised, all things considered.
We just have like an hour-long halakhic discussion about whether or not you can apply that to the creation of pizza boxes.
Should man create pizza boxes in the image that God created them in?
I love the idea, but also that it would be like the Talmud, that it was someone would be arguing that, and then another person, like 100 years later, be like, "You're a fucking idiot, and you are an affront to God." In a way, the first podcasters.
Oh my goodness, you're right. So yeah, that's our update with Zoom. They pivoted away from whatever it was they were doing and have pivoted towards some new shit. And I'm excited to see what they pivot to next. Maybe financial services. You know, perhaps they could just take all the money that they've been given by SoftBank and just put it all on red.
Wouldn't it like make sense that they would pivot to like a DNA company?
Oh, yeah,
Using this like spit samples from like pizza crusts?
Oh, yeah, you can pay.
There won't be any spit because it's greaseless pizza, so it just sucks all the moisture out of your mouth. You're just like dying of dehydration eating this slice of pizza as it just like a lemon, like it just fucking sucks all of the like water out of your body.
No, you pay for it by spitting into a vial and then they own your DNA. That's how it's going to work. Okay, so Alex Garden says, as we scale more, it helps save the world. And as of the recording of this episode, we seem to have narrowly avoided a global conflagration, not actually because of the restraint shown by the Iranian government in response to sort of multiple and U.S. provocations increasing in intensity, but instead because Alex Garden, CEO of Zoom Pizza, now Zoom Box Factory, has saved the world by doing some shit with sugarcane. So I guess we can cancel the Iran section.
Yeah,
It's been fun.
Yeah, we just do more box apologetics instead.
Yeah. So, Séamus, now that we no longer need to talk about Iran, are you cool talking about boxes for the next 45 minutes?
What's your perfect Sunday?
Oh God! Take out the cardboard box, just sit in it all day, just soak in the air.
Okay, so unfortunately, we live in the real world where Alex Garden has not been able yet to save the world from some unspecified threat.
Not with that attitude, Riley.
Yeah, well, not
Like
yet.
a couple
He has to
days,
pivot.
man.
Yeah, stop being so defeatist about this.
Look, Alex Garden just needs to find the right pivot, and then he can save the world from whatever threat we're saving it from with a round box.
His pitch can basically be like every country where like Zoom operates, there will be no wars, right? Same with like, didn't the McDonald's right?
Yeah, the democratic Zoom peace theory.
That was proven wrong, though.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was proven wrong in Georgia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not even real anymore, man. Nothing's real.
I mean, technically, that was a franchise of McDonald's. So actually,
boom.
Come on.
everyone's like sinecure job at the Atlantic, writing about how two countries in which the X Factor has been broadcast have never put economic sanctions on one another or whatever. They can all keep their jobs because they were technically right. We don't live in that world. We live in a world of messy imperialist shit, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. So I'm going to do a little bit of a table setting right now. And then, Séamus, I'm going to ask you if I've missed anything from my summary of the situation.
A beautiful tablescape you're going to craft for us.
So a group of Iranian-backed protesters in Iraq basically owned the U.S. embassy really hard some days ago. The U.S. responded to this with the international version of, hey, you get off my lawn, which to them is, of course, assassinating one of the most powerful, important, and beloved figures in Iran. Iran responded to this with an outpouring of national grief, clarifying to the world that their cheers of death to America is a political statement about America's leadership and general role as a global menace. It then conducted a hyper-competent missile attack that basically involved a circus-level trick shooting, so they only leveled the porta potties of several U.S.-occupied bases, but they didn't quite stick the landing, and also accidentally shot down a Ukrainian jetliner. And all the people who supported the U.S. shooting down an Iranian passenger airliner in 1988 are not taking the shut the fuck up forever wagging your finger at Iran challenge. Trump then said all is well, and Rouhani has made it clear that direct hostilities won't increase further. Séamus, have I more or less summarized the situation, and what have I missed?
Okay. I'm just gonna need to clarify a few things. Yeah, it's fine.
Please get my ass.
Okay, so the group of protesters in Iraq, just for some clarification, they were a different set of protesters than the ones that were protesting the Iraqi government previously. And also there was a lot of militia members who were Iranian-backed in that crowd when they attempted to break in. After that, the phrase circus-level trick shooting, at least there was, I think, a map, satellite photo that was released that showed that they had hit the air control tower as well as some barracks. So I wouldn't say it was just porta potties. I don't know. I don't know if there were porta potties in those in the buildings that were hit. And also, yeah, the Ukrainian jetliner was after making. I mean, that wound is still very, very fresh, in that Iran tried its utmost to avoid basically all American casualties or Iraqi casualties by alerting people and maneuvering around it. And only an hour after attempting to be that diligent, they immediately accidentally blow up an airplane full of 176 people.
That is
like
absolutely the timeline that is the perfect timeline that we live in, is to play this beautiful aria on a Stradivarius for an hour and a half and have everybody rapt and silent, and then on the final note just taking the violin and like turning it upside down in your hands, winding up and aiming it directly at your own dick. Just incredible.
It's just It's just an incredible fuck up of just insane proportions. Like, and I'll go into the ramifications of it later on, but it's truly incredible how badly, I mean, not to put it in, I guess, light terms, but how badly they blew this layup, where they had the propaganda victory of retaliating against the United States in a way that also did not result in further retaliation from the United States, but then killed hundreds of their own citizens and then immediately destroyed all of the national unity that they had cultivated because of Soleimani's death. And now, as we're recording this, there are protesters out in the streets of Tehran calling for the resignation of Khamenei. So, good job, guys.
Resign, bitch.
You did it. Like, resign, bitch.
Just incredible.
Has SoftBank made an investment in the like Iraqi air defense forces? Like, how the fuck did this happen?
No, it's okay. So I can explain, because the head of the IRGC Aerospace Division gave a press conference today, and the level of structural insanity that led up to this point. This is a rare admission of guilt from the Iranian government about really anything wrong that they've done. So essentially, the story is right after on Wednesday, when the attack on Al Asad Air Base happened, there was a heightened state of alert, obviously, and there was a call out to put in a no-fly zone over Iran because of the threat of possibly cruise missiles or from American retaliation. That was not honored because there were a lot of airplanes already in the air, and there were departures that were already coming out from Tehran airport at the time that the missiles were flying. So 8 flights have departed from Tehran airport with no issue at all. But then this Ukraine international airplane is flying, and it shows up as a blip on the radar in this anti-aircraft battalion operator. Only one guy. He sends a message back to his commander because he's worried that this could be a cruise missile. And the tweet by Trump threatening cultural sites in Iran had put him on a heightened state of alert. He doesn't receive a response back for 10 seconds. And he doesn't wait more than 10 seconds, but he thinks that the threat of the cruise missile is so great, potentially, that he fires the missile at the jetliner. And in about a couple seconds, it's in flames, and it takes about 2 minutes for it to hit the ground. If you just waited a couple seconds longer, and the commander on the other line had been able to figure out the communication issue, then this could have been avoided. And after that, there was just this absolute fiasco that occurred with this cover up. That there was, so on Wednesday, apparently the elements of the IRGC knew that this had been an accidental shoot down, and they wanted to explain it. And this is the official government story. It's the sanitized version. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but even in this version, it's quite damning. So they went to higher ups in the IRGC to we need to like talk about this. But instead, the people who knew about the missile shoot down were quarantined and were prevented from speaking to the higher ups. And this means that the Supreme Leader, the President, all the higher ups in the IRGC, aviation officials who had to give out a press conference that there was no missile shoot down, they're certain of it, they didn't know. So they were deliberately prevented from explaining the truth about this matter. And for 3 days, they were just Iranian aviation officials were saying this was a mechanical error. This was a mechanical error. We're going to do an investigation 2 years long. We're going to invite all the other countries into this. We're going to figure this out. But then the United States said that they had intelligence saying that this was a missile shoot down.
Yeah, it was a cell phone video, right? Like
there were, after that, very, very shortly after that, there was a cell phone video that came out, and it very quickly was geolocated, and it wasn't just a random cell phone video. It was in the area that it happened, and there were concerns from people like at the Gray Zone that it was potentially faked, it was unverifiable. But then there was a second cell phone video that came out that showed the similar angle, similar location, showing the exact same scenario occurring. And it became pretty clear at that point that you don't have to trust the U.S. intelligence on this. You don't have to only go on that. Like there's videos of it. There's eyewitness accounts of it. There's images of the debris. There's even an image potentially showing like the missile itself on the ground. And then the Iranian aviation official gave a press conference yesterday saying that we're going to do an investigation, but we are certain with complete surety that there was no missile involved in this attack. There was no missile fired. And then later that night, there was a message went out to the Iranian press saying that they were going to reveal the real reason behind the Ukrainian jetliner going down, which surprised a lot of people since they just had a press conference explaining that. And then, of course, today they admitted to it. The IRGC commander came out and said that he wished he was dead and that he didn't want to see this. People are calling for IRGC officials to resign. Just politicians and representatives from all stripes are apologizing, and just a very, very, very large outpouring of grief and admission of guilt that is very, very rare for the Iranian government.
Well, I mean, they did kill a lot of Iranians, right? Like that's got to be part of that calculation.
The majority of the people on the Ukrainian jet were Iranians. More specifically, a lot of them were Canadian Iranians. There were lots of people. There were images that were spread around the newspapers and Persian outlets. A lot of people were coming back from like weddings, birthday parties, study abroad trips. Everybody, a lot of Iranian journalists that I spoke to, they either knew someone who was on that plane or they knew someone who knew someone who was on that plane. And diaspora communities, they talk with their family back in Iran. It's a very, very personal tragedy to a lot of people. So, and additionally into that, you're all familiar with Iran Air Flight 655, right?
Yes.
You mentioned that.
We'll
You
get
mentioned
into this in
beginning.
a bit, I suspect, but yeah.
Yeah. That national trauma of having a flight shot down by the United States, it's still very, very fresh in the minds of a lot of Iranians. So to have that happen again by your own government, it's not something that you just kind of easily whisk away and you say, "Oh, sorry, it's all good. It's an accident. No hard feelings." No, things are going to get very, very difficult.
It is the hell timeline because of all of the things that could have gone wrong. Like, if they had killed 100-something people literally any other way than just shooting down a commercial airliner with a surface-to-air missile, it wouldn't have been as acute a fuck-up, I think.
So, Séamus, I want to ask you then, right? Because I was listening to you on the Popular Front podcast, which is a sort of an independent conflict studies, like military affairs podcast, and it's very good. And I urgently recommend anyone who wants to listen to the story of who Soleimani was and what his significance was to Iran. I suggest you listen to that show that you were on. We'll link it in the description. But you were talking about how Soleimani, when he was killed, it was this sort of national rallying moment for Iran because he was seen as sort of beyond the domestic politics of the country, even though he had political beliefs himself that were quite to the right, sort of anti-communist and so on. He was seen as this, as a national, sort of like a figure of national respect. And when he was killed, there was this moment of unity among a relatively, disunited and somewhat fractious polity. And now, after the downing of the airliner, we have sort of Iran has kind of lost that moment of unity.
That would be an accurate assessment of that. Yeah, there was in between the strike on Al-Assad and now when they admitted that they accidentally shot it down, and there was a bit of time where there was discussion about whether or not Ukraine International had been shot down, or if it was a mechanical error. There was kind of this limbo that many Iranians were in because they have been clamoring for, a lot of them have been clamoring for revenge. They've been clamoring for hard, severe retaliation. And the Iranian media, despite the fact that it's kind of clear that they were trying to avoid American and Iraqi casualties, in the media they had been claiming that 80 American soldiers had been killed, hundreds more injured, that this was a massive, catastrophic loss for the United States Army. I don't think really many people bought that, at least from my impression. But there was this limbo where, what's gonna come next? If Trump isn't really escalating the situation, and Iran has made it clear that they are not going to escalate the situation, it's still a slap in the face to Trump as their propaganda, as Iranian propaganda likes to state about it, but it's not this. The thing that I would there's a movie that I would reference for the fantasy that many Iranians would hope would happen. It's a CGI animated movie called Battle of the Persian Gulf 2. It's a movie envisioning a world where Qasem Soleimani, he hears news that that America is going to invade through the Strait of Hormuz, and he's tasked with fighting off the invasion. And it ends with a massive kinetic strike from space that destroys the entire American Navy in this massive thing. Like, it's this huge explosion. It kills thousands of people, and that's kind of the nationalistic fervor that I think a lot of people were whipped up into. And after this, no Americans dead. Still slap, but it's not much. But after that, there was that limbo period, and then as we're kind of waiting for the American governments and the Iranian governments to make their next move, the admittance of the jetliner being shut down happens, And all of that kind of nationalistic unity, all of that putting aside our differences to unite against the American enemy, that all kind of wilts away very, very, very quickly.
When you put it like that, I'm kind of surprised that they did admit to it. Like, by that point, why not just kind of brazen it out, deny everything, and just sort of let people live with the ambiguity?
That's the thing. That's the thing that I think surprised a lot of people, and it also seemed to surprise people who were active within the Iranian government, because just before we started recording this, I saw a clip from Iranian state TV. There was a reporter asking someone on the street, should we have not admitted that we shut down this plane because this has given credence to our enemies? Because it's given them ammo.
But that's certainly what the gray zone people. I think that was their thing going in, was like, even if it is obvious that this was an Iranian shootdown, why give the US the sort of the credit that attaches to that? Why not just deny everything?
I think after, I mean, there are a lot of factors into this, but after the Iranian protests that just happened a couple months ago, where at the very lowest estimate, hundreds were killed, but the Iranian government has not released any casualty figures, dead or injured, to assuage any of these people's concerns about how many people were killed. So it's not like the Iranian government is necessarily it's not a commonplace thing to admit these things. But I think, considering the scale of the tragedy, that's one thing. But also, as I said before, Iran Air Flight 655, in the wake of that kind of tragedy, when you have that kind of historical reference point, do you really want to go down? There are certain points that even the Iranian government will not cross. Do you really want to go down as the administration that lied to the Iranian people about a tragedy that befell the country 30 years ago, that same kind of tragedy?
Yeah. It's too stark a contra point.
And I think, in fact, the other sort of point we can take from this as well is that this really gives the lie to the American view of what Iran is like, because the fact that like in the American foreign policy imagination, Iran has no account. The Iranian government has zero accountability to any of its citizens and can lie and steal and oppress freely. And in the American government American foreign policy imagination, as far as the blob is concerned around DC, they wouldn't care about shooting down a liner of their own people. And the fallout from this entire incident has shown that is, I mean, what we all knew all along, which is that is such a childish, pointlessly Manichaean worldview applied to foreign policy.
But it's also like a necessary, and can I
come on in? Thank the mic.
Oh, sorry. It's also like a necessary thing for them to like entertain, because with, you know, and I said this like from the outset, which is that you know, this isn't kind of like the killing of like Qasem Soleimani. You know, this wasn't kind of the trigger that would like lead to a potential war. Like, people have wanted war in America. They've wanted war with Iran for a long time. And the reason why is that like they have this view of what Iran needs to be, because Iran needs to be set up in a particular way in order to kind of like to quote unquote legitimately like wage a war against it. And I think that kind of like what you've just said now is like a prime example of like the kind of vision that columnists are still portraying about Iran as being this like unaccountable, top-down authoritarian. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, in the British imagination, this is always framed in terms of the mullahs. Like,
yeah, we have mullahs. What if we went back to miniskirts?
Yeah, exactly.
And in fact, I was speaking with someone who was sort of very active in foreign policy in the 80s. And I was speaking to him about this episode specifically, and he was saying that when you're thinking about the Iran as it exists in the American imagination. And I'm sort of serving this up to the group here, so you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. He says that you cannot overstate the extent to which the US and UK are disappointed when their ambition to create Iran as a Middle Eastern version of Japan, ultra Western friendly, sort of this sort of booming some kind of booming tech economy that they would largely have sort of like some like control
Big
and
Gundam
influence
statues
over.
everywhere.
Yeah, just
no one knows why. No one knows why.
Those plans were frustrated by coming into contact with the reality of the country.
Yeah.
You said it was
Absolutely.
like the loss of a lover.
Yeah, well, I
Also,
mean,
just like
Sorry, go ahead.
And Séamus, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that sort of theory that there is this psychological wound that it cannot be filled.
I would agree pretty much wholeheartedly with that. Just to address a point that you made earlier about Iran being accountable to its citizens, just sort of go on a brief tangent here, if I may. There's the real head scratching problem about Iran is that it's both accountable to its citizens in some respects and also completely not.
Like Britain.
Yeah, it's frustratingly. I don't really know how to describe this. There's a system in place that allows just enough dissent where you can criticize some policies, you can criticize some actions that are objectionable even by the Islamic Republic standards. But when you try to criticize the system itself, the Islamic Republic system itself, there's a massive crackdown on that kind of thinking. You have to think about everything in terms of you can't question the Republic in that sense. You can't question the system itself.
So, sort of like how people like to characterize the deep state in its original form in Turkey, right? Like, you can have however many changes of government you want, but you have to have the Republic or else.
I think that's... I don't know too much about the Turkish deep state, but that sounds fairly accurate. It sounds fairly comparable.
Well, I mean, that's kind of like... I've been banging this drum for a while about whenever sort of Western liberals want to do this thing of, oh, look at how backwards such and such a place is because look at the laws that say you can't do this. I always want to point out that there's like the way that governments work, the way that laws work is a lot more flexible in practice than people understand. And there's always going to be some amount of like dissent or illegality or anything like that that's sort of quietly tolerated at some times and not at others. And it's really difficult to get people to understand that even about their own countries. But yeah.
But I think like so much of like the ire towards Iran from like neoconservatives and like just like liberal columnists and stuff tend to like they touch on the kind of structure of the Islamic Republic, and I think for a lot of them like what it comes down to deep down is the fact that the Islamic Republic has like survived, and Shiism in the region has not only survived but it's kind of gained a lot of power to the point where like Iran is a power broker in the Middle East, which is why we're seeing lots of weird things where like all these kind of actual theocratic nations like Saudi Arabia and like these countries in the Gulf all of a sudden like Western countries, the United States, are really keen on working with them.
Yeah,
they're really keen on working
our
with
guys. Yeah. And like
right.
the problem with Shia Islam to all of this sort of this columnist said or whatever is that we bet against it. And we're not supposed to lose that bet. We went wholeheartedly in on the absolute worst people we could find just to like set the sort of to stack that sectarian divide in favor of Sunnis. And like, yeah, no, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to like die quietly.
But it also means that when we kind of talk about supporting dissenting Iranians, like often the people who are kind of saying that we support like dissent in Iran, we support kind of left wing kind of union movements in Iran, and like the union movement in Iran is like really big. It's like considerably big. I don't know if it's really big, but it's like considerably like larger than in most other countries in the region. And when you hear like leftists in the West like talk about, or like when you hear liberals in the West rather talking about like the problems of Iran, it's very rarely about that. It's very rarely about like actual kind of policies or laws. It's always about like the aesthetics, and fundamentally it's about like why has the Islamic Republic like survived.
They never I think understand the revolution and the way that panned out, and the involvement of socialists and communists and unionists and much more moderate clerics than Khomeini, who eventually succeeded. And like you're never going to get that kind of understanding, and instead you're going to get, we support the Iranian dissenters like the Mujahideen Khalq.
My favorite group.
Yes,
I was going to mention
those guys. Yeah.
Mujahideen Khalq as well, but also I think the combination too from the neoconservative and the the sort of rank and file American pro-war, pro-military person, a lot of it, in my opinion, comes from there's certainly a generational thing with people, older than me. I'm 35, older than me, who have some living memory of the hostage crisis. And then also people who served in the U.S. military in Iraq are convinced that everyone who killed an American soldier was actually operating under the orders of the Iranian government. Or that, for example, things like explosively formed penetrators were all built in Iran, and the people who deployed them were Iranian, and the Iranian militias were killing American soldiers. And to some extent, there were Shia militias in Iraq that had allies and training and advising from people in Iran. But the idea that the Iranian government was puppet mastering Iraqi opposition to the American occupation is absurd on its face, but that's absolutely a thing that people, not just in the DC establishment, but in the kind of, in my opinion, the general pro-war American subconscious absolutely believe it.
That's why it's so wild that killing Soleimani actually kind of came closest to making this real. I think that's the only thing you could have done that could have made Iraqi Shia nationalists make common cause that quickly and that readily with Iran, would be to kill one of their guys next to one of Iran's guys in Iraq.
And make it an absolute joke that you ever even once considered Iraq an actual sovereign state.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just the absolute dumbest thing the United States has done in a very, very long time. It continues to astound me when I keep having to talk about it.
We talked about this on What a Hell of a Way to Die, but basically there's the joke that, when you get trained in this stuff in the military, that you never give, your commander a joke or a bad or an intentionally fake course of action to choose. But you certainly don't hand Donald Trump the option to fuck the moon. And they did. And sure enough, Donald Trump got on the fucking Apollo spacecraft and went up and stuck his dick in the moon rocks. And now we're living with the consequences of that.
So, absolutely.
I'd like to take us on a little bit, right? Where I'd like us to peer forward a little bit and look further up at the kind of structural implications of this. And I do also have some thoughts on how lefties should think of foreign policy, which I'll get to sort of after this section, because I think we've brought up some interesting points there. But I like the U.S., right? As an imperial power, the U.S. needs Iran as an enemy, just as they needed Iran as a friend before the Islamic Revolution, so they could say, look, we're making Japan in the Middle East. It's going to be great. We're going to have this sort of westernized country. Check out the miniskirts. Everyone's a fucking solid 10. And one of my questions is what purpose will Iran serve the U.S.? What purpose does Iran serve the U.S. neoconservative imagination now that they're in a continued stalemate with nowhere left to go but to escalate, I imagine, and vice versa? And what is the current threat posed to the entire fucking world by the U.S. bellicosity?
I discussed this on my Popular Front interview, which you should listen to. Listeners at home. The response to the killing of Soleimani by a lot of pundits, for example, at the Federalist, there was that theater critic, I think, who was talking about.
Is it John Podhoretz?
No, not John Podhoretz. I wish it was John Podhoretz. He would have had something funny to say. Something saccharine. But he was a theater critic for the Federalist. He was talking about if you attack New York City, if you attack my home, I'm gonna level you, buddy.
Oh yeah, I saw this. Because somebody from I think Chapo or somewhere else dug up a tweet of his from 6 months before that was me 200-pound ceramic bathtub. I was trying to move up some stairs. One.
And also he was talking about how he thinks divorce should be illegal or something.
Yeah, just a very normal man.
Normal guy.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about our last Iran episode. We talked about the NYPD and their weird mania for you better not do nothing to Staten Island.
Oh yeah, no. Bill De Blasio came out, and I was talking about this with a bunch of my friends. Bill De Blasio comes out and says, not only in a tweet but also as a press conference, talking about we don't think that Iran is gonna attack New York City, but we got to be prepared. It's what? You just contradicted your own statement. Why would you do that?
What?
There was also the LAPD that made that response. The whole tweet about like, oh, we're monitoring all potential threats, and it's like,
guy.
Listen to our previous bonus episode if you would like to hear the full rundown of the NYPD and LAPD's attempt to do police brutality on the RGC.
With the LAPD kind of makes sense because like Iran had Iran has a lot of former Los Angelinos there. No, LA has like a massive community of Iranians who live in Hollywood.
There's this community of displaced people from Silver Lake living in Tehran.
They know exactly how to take down Los Angeles, which is go there and all flush every toilet in unison. The city will be leveled.
What I was going to say is like I don't understand how you could kind of combat the threat of Iran in like New York City when the subways like don't even. Well, I don't understand what they would do.
Yeah, they're gonna sabotage the subway by like having somebody take a dump in a car. But
they'll all jump the turnstile at the same time.
You want to hear the answers to that? Check the premium episode.
You're trying to get us to stop doing the same episode twice.
I fucking hate it when Qasem Soleimani's agents pull the emergency alarm during rush hour on every train in New York City.
But one of the things. Okay, so I'm yanking us back on track here because I do think one of the risks here is that after this exchange of missiles, right, where we have the U.S. assassinating Qasem Soleimani, Iran attempting to sort of do a very measured and rational response, but fucking up basically.
Yes, put it lightly.
My concern is that because the U.S. needs Iran as an enemy. Any kind of meaningful long-term detente has been made even more impossible by this. Obviously,
I just realized something. This is what would be a fair comparison for Americans. I don't know about British people. I guess for British people, it would be like if Iran or some other much maligned international enemy
had blown up Matt Hancock.
Accidentally did the blitz while defending. They're like, oh, we defended London, but we accidentally blew up the subway and did another 7-7. But for America, it would literally be like, oh, if they had launched an intercontinental ballistic missile, we shot them all down, but we accidentally crashed a plane into the New World Trade Center. Yeah. It would basically be like that.
But what I want to think about, right, is that this has happened. Iran is like. It does have its sort of ways of retaliating against the U.S. through its proxies. And my concern is that as this keeps going, we're now in a more unstable version of this dyad, where one another's actions are less predictable and where they have nowhere to go but up, really, unless both sides make the choice to disengage. Again, I am not trying to both sides this here. Obviously, it's on the U.S. to disengage, but because of the mistake around the airliner, Iran has sort of lost its moral authority in this situation. So my concern is that it's more unstable.
I have an optimistic answer to reassure you with this, right? Which is that if we say, like, assassination is sort of a known game, right? And, like, Iran and the US often through Israel, we kill one of their guys, they kill one of our guys, something like that. Like fucking Mahmoud Mafouh in Dubai. Or those Iranian nuclear physicists who got killed in Iran.
I had Imad Munye as well, was someone I've written down as an example.
Yeah, for sure. If that's sort of understood as how you do assassination, the Soleimani thing is so singular and so stupid and so unlike those that it's sort of it's a once in a lifetime type thing. And if the people around Trump can get a handle on him, as seemed to be somewhat indicated by him waiting a day and then coming out giving a statement on fucking Quaaludes, then maybe something a bit more like normalcy will sort of return to this. But that's the optimistic.
I agree with that optimistic view. The issue is that we're not unfamiliar with this concept. Trump's brain is basically soup at this point.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So but Trump has, even if his brain is literally pulling out of his ears as we speak, he has somewhat of a consistent worldview. When you have him like in a room and you haven't attacked, like if you're arguing with him about war, he'll initially say that he doesn't want war, he wants a deal, that kind of thing. it requires other people to speak with him for more than 5 minutes to immediately get him to switch that position.
Yeah, he needs a hot general.
He needs a hot general
to tell him what.
So
to
the
think.
hot generals,
and he was flanked by two extremely hot generals during that statement, which is
Look,
folks, the Marines. The Marines.
we've had the generals who are about equal to Tom Cruise in body, but better in face.
Yeah.
We need the Zac Efron generals.
Well, like my take on that whole address was
We
that there
need
was
to recruit the Magic Mike
there
cast.
was a hot general coup. I don't know if Trump is well enough to know it, but I think he is now being piloted by some sexy generals.
in any case, there was. I think the generals, after the Millennium Challenge of 2002 and the absolute disaster that was, I think American generals. I mean, this is my impression. Obviously, I could be very, very, very wrong. I think American generals know that the dangers of going directly into war with Iran and escalating it and escalating it and escalating it to that point would lead to, and that's why they gave Trump other options to not do that.
I don't know about generals, but I do think it's very funny and entirely plausible based on like the hell world that we live in, where everyone has the worst and most petty motivations. That the reason why the U.S. Navy in particular does not want to fight a war with Iran is because it's dominated by this black shoe mafia of surface warfare officers who absolutely don't want to see their entire branch rendered obsolete by getting sunk in the Straits of Hormuz.
During the Iran-Iraq War,
just something.
Yeah, during the Iran-Iraq War, there was the U.S. took a preemptive strike and sunk, I think, about half of Iran's operational navy. But since then, Iran has obviously invested into other things, particularly speedboats.
Small boats.
And as we saw displayed in the Millennium Challenge 2002, Colonel Van Riper, amazing name.
Incredible.
He deployed those speedboats, those suicide speedboats, and he killed 2,000 naval cadets in that war game.
Yep.
So, and the U.S. Navy, I don't think, has invested in speedboat warfare either. So I think...
We're gonna get that laser sooner or later once we can like stop fucking pulling around a gigantic battery for it.
Well, I was thinking about this a little bit as well, right? How sort of the endemic culture of graft and corruption in the entire U.S. imperial war machine means that, like, I know we mentioned this before, but that any kind of war in Iran would be a complete suicide mission. In as much as, like, how are you going to achieve air superiority when it's raining and your main fighter plane is the F-35?
How are you going to fight a naval battle when all of your confident admirals have been indicted for Fat Leonard-related crimes?
Just never let a flag officer anywhere near a hotel or an expense account or anything.
And I mean, look, yeah, they do have overwhelming superiority in almost every respect, except like basic competence and anything working.
I mean, if you want me to go into at least some detail about how an invasion of Iran would play out, I can, if your listeners would like.
Oh, please, war game.
You know what?
Getting stuck in the Zagros mountains for
I'd
2
say
years for us.
I'd rather hear that than make fun of David Brooks. Okay. So I'm gonna.
Yeah, that's our new third segment. Ditch a third of the notes, and we're doing what happens if President Trump's moon man brain leads him to invade Iran. I want to see Stars and Stripes in Tehran.
Okay, so let's just say that the worst happens, and everything is escalated to a certain point. Pompeo has gotten to Trump and decides that,
or President Tom Cotton in 2028.
Oh God! Don't do that.
The lathe.
No, don't worry. I've already summoned Andrew Doyle as DCMS secretary.
If Tom Cotton is president, he might just honestly just nuke Iran. Honestly, but let's say for the moment that Tom Cotton has decided that he's going to take his chances invading the country of Iran. So let's say they decide to go through the Strait of Hormuz to make maybe a naval landing on the south of the country. immediately they are faced with the fact that the Iranian Navy is very, very experienced in asymmetric warfare, particularly with naval forces. And they will likely do something similar to how the Millennium Challenge 2002 played out, blow up a bunch of U.S. Navy boats. And that part of that mission is pretty fucked up, I guess is a way to be putting it. Now, they could make a small landing on the south of the country, but the issue is there's flat land on that part of the country. But after that, if you want to pull up a topographic map of Iran to follow along here, there's a massive mountain range that pretty much covers the whole country up until Tehran.
That's fine. You just drive the armored column straight through that at speed.
Yeah.
Guys, elephants.
Okay.
Come on.
Okay.
Hannibal did it.
Hannibal did do this.
Oh,
However,
God. We're gonna get a 12-strong movie, but it's just special forces guys wearing pacols on elephants.
So after that point, okay. So obviously doing a land invasion from the south, or potentially, let's say, we keep doing that. We do Iraq occupation 2.0. Because it appears to be the direction that we're going now by rejecting the Iraqi parliament's request for the United States to leave the country. Let's say that we use Iraq to house U.S. forces that are going to eventually invade Iran. So maybe they manage to take Afghans again, small areas near Loristan in Iranian Kurdistan. But again, you run into the same problem. You've got massive mountain ranges that are extremely difficult to traverse, and Iran can just as easily bomb those necessary highways. And then, well, what's your third option? You could potentially airdrop right into Tehran, but there are obvious issues.
That market garden feeling.
Yeah. You were running the risk, if you want to airdrop into that general area around Tehran, you run into the massive risk of having anti-aircraft guns basically taking out a large percentage of your force, especially now that I believe Iran has ordered Russian anti-aircraft launchers. And after the arms embargo is set to expire, I believe 1.5 years from now, they're allowed to buy many more modern weapons, which would be much more effective in that sense. But let's say, even based on all of these horrible, horrible factors that would make the invasion of Iraq seem like a cakewalk, because of all the flat land that exists.
Considering that Iraq is flat up until like Mosul, basically.
Yeah.
It's a very different environment.
Yeah. But also, surely, Iraq is not only flat, but Iraq was sort of considerably more fractious with like a weaker state.
Weaker military, weaker state. And you also had a massive military port in Kuwait where you could bring everything safely before invading.
Yes.
Yeah.
You basically, and also on the note of the port, if you want to get support for your military operation from maybe local forces, you could not have picked the worst two that you could have called on, Saudi Arabia and the UAE.
In terms of military confidence.
50 guys carrying an F-16 with some Emirati prince in it. Just incredible.
If there was...
It's great. It's like, I didn't know that actually you could take a fighter jet off with rims that big.
Which white Dior belt will I wear to the invasion?
Okay, I can see it. I can see it clearly. There was an article in the National Interest, I think about a year or so ago, that postulated that the United Arab Emirates, it's proven its worth in Yemen. So obviously, in a war with Iran, it would steamroll them. Sure. And as we know, the war in Yemen ended 2 years ago. So, sure.
Everything went fine. I don't have a lot of faith in any military force, most of whose budget is sunglasses.
I mean, that's the thing though. Like most of the American military forces budget as well is like.
I was including like naval aviators in that. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Well, no, it's the special sunglasses you need to see the heads-up display in the F-35 cost $4 million.
But also, I would say, too, that, I mean, the U.S. just simply doesn't have enough forces that it can call upon to do this competently. And that's the thing that always makes me wonder when they start doing saber rattling, because even under the assumption that you could call up a similar coalition to Iraq, when you think about the U.S., the U.K., the Australians, then a bunch of like really small strap hanger countries that came along too.
You forgot Poland.
I was going to mention Poland and places like Honduras and El Salvador, Uganda, places like that also sent troops. Assuming you could even do that, you're still nowhere near enough to be successful. The U.S., when you look at reserve component and active duty military, isn't going to really be able to manage more than it doesn't really have more than like 1 million people to call upon, and even then, that would be literally pulling everyone out from everywhere. Yeah. So that's just not feasible.
There is one upside, which is Captain Buttigieg, sir, we need your service again.
We need you to drop a PowerPoint on Iran.
Yeah.
Although, honestly, we just need, if you want to defeat Iran, it seems like the only way to do it is to, get McKinsey to give them cost-cutting advice for their army, and then it just won't work anymore.
I mean, I guess that's the way that I've always seen it, though, when I think about a war with Iran, is that, even if you, by some miracle masterstroke, you are able to achieve, force-on-force superiority and actually beat back the Iranian military and occupy the country, the occupation is going to be, first of all, that conflict will be produce casualties on the order that people in America just have not dealt with since Vietnam, at best. At worst, fucking Korea. And beyond that, an occupation is going to be so unbelievably deadly and just so much worse than Iraq was, that I don't think that you're even going to be able to kind of slap a Band-Aid on it the way that they did in the Iraq war, and basically allow anybody who didn't have a massively violent felony to join the military and stop loss everyone they possibly can, and hold guard and reserve units in country for 15 to 18 months. That's not going to be enough. And I don't know, Séamus, if that was what you were leading to when we talk about the sort of how that the on the ground scenario would go out. But to me, it's a disaster to try and invade. And even if by a miracle chance you're successful, you will never successfully occupy that country.
There's kind of 3 points that I want to elaborate on there. We say we need more occupation troops than we could possibly imagine. It's probably even worse than that. There was a report by the Rand Corporation during the Iraq War that stated, I believe, that you need 1 soldier for every 4 people in a country to effectively occupy it. So when we're talking, or I believe one for every 6. So the calculations that I did for that with Iran would require 1.6 million U.S. troops stationed around the country, which I believe is currently more than active duty soldiers exist with the United States, Army itself.
Oh no, far more than that. Yeah. The United States Army is about 500-ish thousand people. I mean, it was getting up to about as much as 600,000, but then after sequestration, they started to reduce it. But then you look at the Marine Corps is 280,000 people, I think, active duty. And I think there's close to about 1 million-ish if you count active duty military and National Guard and reserves. But it's just
obscene numbers.
It's an absurd number that, it would legitimately require you to pull everybody from everywhere from Germany to Korea to Diego Garcia and put them on a fucking boat to the Strait of Hormuz. And I just don't expect they could.
I'm
they
kind of in favor of
this
to. Now. This is accelerationism, right? You're probably doing less imperialism if you go and get everybody invading Iran and getting owned than if you have them spread out across 500 different bases.
It's Pompeo is a communist. Oh god.
Yeah. The worse the better. He's deep cover Leninist.
So, in fact, all of this has actually come round to the point where I want to read a couple of lines from this David Brooks article, because this discussion now underlines how just completely vapid the American pundit class that dragged the world into war in Iraq the first time is.
Now, before you start reading, I just want to ask you a question, because I don't care for David Brooks. I do not read his content. Was he active in the early 2000s? Was he for the Iraq War? Was he on record as supporting the Iraq War?
Oh yeah, he was absolutely one of those within 6 months. It's
Oh,
gonna
okay.
get better
Okay.
within
All right.
6
Just
months
want to give my
guys.
context.
Yeah.
All right. I'm ready.
Interestingly, when David Brooks wrote The Second Mountain about the road to character, he was referring to the Zagros Mountains.
Was that the one about leaving his wife?
Yes, that's the one where he climbed Mount Research Assistant, and now is going to be enlisting.
Yeehawing like a fucking horse.
The article.
Jesus Christ.
The article is from the New York Times, and it's called "Trump Has Made Us All Stupid."
I mean,
Yeah,
not wrong.
okay.
Not wrong.
I mean, he's not wrong.
But it's about Iran.
I'm excited. Okay. All right.
The decline of discourse in the anti-Trump echo chamber.
Okay. All right.
I love what this is doing to all of you. Donald Trump, he writes, is impulse-driven, ignorant, narcissistic, and intellectually dishonest, said David Brooks into a mirror. So you'd think that those of us in the anti-Trump camp would go out of our way to show we're not like him, that we are judicious, informed, mature, and reasonable. But the events of the past week have shown that the anti-Trump echo chamber has become a mirror image of Trump himself. Of course, David Brooks, as always, is just writing about his own anxieties that he is impulse-driven, ignorant, narcissistic, and intellectually dishonest. But I digress. For example, there's a complex policy problem at the heart of this week's Iran episode.
It's not fucking Game of Thrones. I know he means episode, but still. It may as well be a box
Yeah,
set.
David Brooks, he's not affected by
Iran-
this, so it's an episode to him.
No.
No. Yeah. I think that's absolutely right.
The
Iran is
Iron
not...
throne.
Interestingly, Séamus, this might be interesting. This was news to you, I bet. But did you know that, quote, Iran is not powerful because it has a strong economy or military?
I mean...
What's up?
Yeah, Iran isn't doing great right now economically. What's his point? What?
It's powerful because it sponsors militias across the Middle East, destabilizing regimes and spreading genocide and sectarian cleansing.
Oh, it's like a franchise.
I don't.
Yeah,
I mean,
Iran-
I personally, I'm not a fan of the Islamic Republic. I'm not a fan of its foreign policy. However, I don't.
Cut his mic. Cut his mic.
There's this. Is he asserting that Iran's military itself isn't like powerful? What?
Yeah,
What?
Yes.
like
Yes.
the reading we had on our last Iran episode, which you should go listen to, where Charles Moore from the Telegraph just says some people say Iran has the strongest military in the world that the US is going to fight since Korea. I don't think so.
Okay. If
Yeah,
I may, just tiny 1 minute tangent, if I may. Okay.
Yes, go for
so the whole around the Middle East, particularly through the Syrian civil war and the war in Yemen, we've basically seen that the Syrian military, the Saudi military, the UAE military are completely dysfunctional and don't know what they're doing.
Fucking dog
It's
shit.
nepotism all the way down.
Sunglass budget.
But
Sunglass budget
Yeah.
rule.
the
Every time.
Iranian military is successful, and the reason why its expertise was wanted by Bashar al-Assad, and that's what turned the tide against the rebels, was because Iran knew what military strategy was experienced in it, trained its fighters in the war of attrition for decades and decades and decades through both war experience and training schools. Oh my God. It's not the Iraqi military where it's just you've got 400,000 people, just throw them at people. Like there's strategy to it. That's why they're formidable. But okay,
Are you suggesting that Bashar al-Assad, what turned his fortunes around, was Iranian advisors and not 50 Russians squatting?
oh, I don't want to go into the logistics of the Russian squatters, the squad kings. That's for another time.
So,
let me just throw something in there too, because I've spoken to people who at least have some, if not necessarily expertise in the region, have dealt with some of the U.S. I don't know what you described as sort of enablers who are monitoring things in Syria, and somebody that I knew who I definitely disagree with politically because he's definitely still pretty neoconish after having been in the military. Basically said that he said that Hezbollah and people like the Iranian military were basically deploying what you might describe as like brigade-sized elements operating in Syria, and so they just been getting experience.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that jives with your observations, Séamus, but like to me, it just strikes me that there's been this war going on for almost a decade. They've been fighting in it at not just like a send 10 guys to fucking we get them off our hands level, but legitimately at like above a tactical level, like what you would say like operational or strategic, and that they're going to transfer that experience into defending their home country.
The IRGC has been very heavily involved in the Syrian civil war since the beginning, and that level of experience that they're taking with them in not only fighting the rebels but fighting ISIS, the force that was about to conquer vast swathes of both Iraq and Syria, that's going to come in pretty obviously in handy when you're fighting the United States, even if the United States is obviously far more of a formidable power than the Islamic State. It's war experience that they would not have gotten.
Similar ideology in places.
Ever since the Iran-Iraq war, there are still those commanders in place who have the extensive experience of doing trench warfare and attrition warfare. But the newer, younger recruits, that experience in Syria is going to assist them greatly if there is a war with the United States, which I hope doesn't happen. But it obviously is going to be somewhat transferable.
Yeah. Indeed. However, I would like to
please,
David Brooks momentarily. Because all of that we just said, like a discussion of the material conditions underlining sort of why Iran actually is a formidable military, David Brooks disagrees. He said, no, it's not powerful. It's actually mean.
What?
And its strength is its meanness. So how
that does seem like a key part of military success is being mean.
So he says,
close with and be mean to the enemy.
So he says we're not going to go in and destroy the militias. So how can we keep them in check so they don't destabilize the region? Again, said David Brooks into a fucking mirror. That's the hard problem, one that stymied past administrations.
What if we did more airstrikes?
The decision to undertake this operation is a matter of weighing risk and reward, as opposed to
just fucking around and finding out.
Yeah, and after the Soleimani killing, you saw American security professionals, and here's where David Brooks is David Brooks, talk in the language of balancing risk and reward. Stanley McChrystal, a retired general, and Michael Mullen, a retired admiral, thought it was worth the risk, whereas Susan Rice thought it wasn't.
Shitheads in the entire
Stanley McChrystal.
But
they made a whole movie about how he was
Alice.
stupid.
I'm sorry, we've killed Séamus just by mentioning Stanley McChrystal's name, and quite rightly so.
Yeah, he was the hunter-killer. Just when you hear his name, you just die of laughing and embarrassment.
His name is a killing word.
But in the anti-Trump echo chamber, that's not how most people were thinking. Led by Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, they avoided the hard, complex problem of how to set boundaries around the militias. Instead, they pontificated on the easy question not actually on the table. Should we have a massive invasion of Iran?
That's always been on the table.
The problem with militias is they don't respect consent, and they're not good giving or game.
Oh god, I want to yell, but I'm in a hotel. I can't express myself. Oh god.
Don't go full Christian on us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we have a massive invasion of Iran? Why were you? So it's like, yeah, David, would you rather we had the professional, measured language with which you and Stanley fucking McChrystal restlessly advocated and persecuted the invasion of Iraq, which went so well in terms of stabilizing the region.
We just have to do the McChrystal Obama strategy of targeted strikes, opportunistic use of special forces. Nothing will go wrong with this.
Also cover up friendly fire on Pat Tillman. Let's do that again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So he's saying most of this week's argument about the Middle East wasn't really about the Middle East. It was just about ourselves. Democrats defend terrorists. Republicans are warmongers. Actual Iranians are just bit players in our imperialistic soap opera. The passive recipients of our greatness or perfidy.
Dude,
I mean,
this is the picture of Garfield looking at the sign with no Garfields and being like, God, I wonder who that's for.
Yeah, and it's fucking hell. Like, it's just the pure blithe ignorance of what it means to be critically engaged in foreign policy is actually infuriating to me as it permeates the sort of great and good of the press of both the US and the UK. Like the fact that in the UK there are pundits and also politicians who are saying, no, the problem is Iran didn't stick to the 2015 JCPOA. You have to respect the deal, and we're worried that you're not respecting the deal.
Well,
It's like it's the incredible failure of thought, or at least at best, it's not a failure of thought. It's just massive sort of cynicism about the intelligence of the populations of the countries which they're either commenting to or ruling over. And I mean, this is kind of one thing I know we're going so long, but I wanted to add one more thing, one tiny thing.
Oh, we didn't even do my fucking conspiracy theory. Well, next episode.
Sorry, next time we will do it. We're like, what's something we've been talking about today, right? And I kind of want to bring this together on like how people on the left can think of foreign policy criticism, because it's true. If you go like Elizabeth Warren and you say, look, Soleimani was a bad guy. He did a lot of bad things around the region. So it was right. But we killed him in the wrong way.
We didn't fill out the paperwork.
Yeah, then you're a sucker and you're playing into the hands of the neocons.
I hate to say it. I hate to say it, but the grey zone cranks are actually right with their first instinct being, fuck you, that's not a missile. You're an American dog and a cunt.
But the problem is, right? And this is something, Séamus, that you talked about on Popular Front, right? Like if you all like Qasem Soleimani was also like a virulent anti-communist. Like the guy did not like the trade union movement. He spent a lot of his early career suppressing socialists. Like, we still have to find a way to understand that these aren't good people, but at the same time, without ever giving any credence to the neoconservative movement, because then that is going to then weaponize us admitting that, like, yeah, this is still like not a good guy. And I don't understand how we can square that circle. And people like David Brooks do it by putting on the helmet that makes you stupid. And I mean, and then
you know what it is.
You
know what the answer is. It's
what?
Something that had been previously monopolized by the like late 2000s liberal blogosphere, where they just did the truly insufferable thing of being like, oh, you want good policies from your candidate for president? Well, why don't you put on your big boy pants? Because we live in the real world instead of doing magic. And we should just do that. That's all realpolitik is. It's just be like, yeah, okay, find me a good guy in like fucking any government ever.
Right.
Like, who is the guy in that role for like, who runs a military or a paramilitary force and who goes around like advancing their nation state's interests through this complex mix of militias and money and everything like that? Who is the good guy who does that? Name them.
Yeah, I mean, Séamus, I'm interested to sort of hear your reactions on this as well, because like I've been following your commentary on this, and I found it to be quite balanced in terms of being very anti-imperialistic while still being critical.
It's and I know if any of my Iranian friends are listening to this, I know you're probably going to hate what I'm going to say here. It's a very, very, very difficult line to cross, because when you preface all of your statements by saying that Soleimani was a bad guy, like, I don't want it to be the case, but neocons always then come in and say, well, you know, if Soleimani was such a bad guy, then why are you against killing him? Why aren't you in support of him being killed? And
I mean, I think there's something I can jump in really fast just to say, because I think for UK listeners, which is a lot of our audience, would get this. Think about the extent to which we all knew there were problems with Corbyn in the leader's office, and just like with some of the things in the Labour Party, but you could not say it, because if you did, the worst people on the planet would be like, oh, see, well, that's why you deserve to fail and we need Blairism again. Like, there was no way to say it without basically opening yourself up to the worst, dumbest criticism. It's
an in-group conversation.
We should not be like caping for Soleimani. We shouldn't be saying that he was, you know, an amazing military hero, that he was just a great man. I don't think that we should be doing that. But at the same time, when we talk about if you are pressed on the issue of if you admit that Qasem Soleimani is such a bad guy, then why don't you support killing him? One, you have to address the fact that killing a foreign official in a foreign country sets an incredibly horrible precedent that could easily be exploited by America's adversaries, if you're going from that angle. And at the same time, if you're talking with leftists and you say the Qasem Soleimani is a bad guy, and they say, well, do you support the neocons? Do you support his murder then? Well, no. The American military that took him out, the people that authorized that operation, the people that got us to this point, are similarly way bad, if not way worse people. You cannot be a fan of both of these people, but you recognize the fact that killing Qasem Soleimani is such an unbelievably reckless action. You should just focus, if you can, just focus on that. The fact that it's incredibly reckless, that it could lead to a war that would kill millions of people, almost inevitably. That it destabilizes the international order by establishing a precedent of killing foreign officials in governments without war being declared, and all those other things involving international law.
And calling them terrorists, too, which is...
the IRGC terrorist designation is one of the dumbest things that I can think of. Because even if the IRGC is involved in incredibly horrible actions around the world, the IRGC is a state arm. Yeah. People can be drafted into it. They run malls. You can work at an IRGC operated mall.
Yep.
Are all these people
construction company? Yeah.
Are these people who were drafted in the IRGC? Are these people all who work with IRGC related construction companies or storefronts? Are these all people accessories to terrorism?
Well, also where they are sponsors of, if you want to say terrorist groups, I'm not going to dispute that Hezbollah is a terrorist group, say. It's not just to fuck around. There is a coherent foreign policy vision at work there. And a vision of Iranian and to a lesser extent Shia interests. It's not the same. You can't compare it to, say, Islamic State.
No. There's a coherent foreign policy to it. I think a lot of people perceive Qasem Soleimani as that kind of Osama bin Laden kind of guy, who is rogue, who just loves to blow things up. But that's really not the case, and that's why killing him was so reckless. Is because it doesn't fuck that up in a way that would be beneficial to the U.S. It fucks it up in that it makes them more aggressive, and it makes everything much more difficult to counter if you're from the perspective of the United States.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about this from the perspective of, say you would, if you had a situation in which Iran and the United States were operating in a similar area, like, for example, the fight against ISIS in Syria, and if somebody on the order of Jim Mattis or Dave Petraeus, before he disgraced himself by sex,
climbing Mount Research Assistant.
Yeah, we're doing a battlefield rotation, and the Iranian military decided to fucking kill them with a drone strike. People would lose their minds, and that's what we did.
Yeah.
And it's like, was he a combatant? Yes. But the idea, I strongly agree with what you said, that the idea that somebody